Trump says, hopefully no need for military action against Iran. New Zealand declines invite to join Board of Peace. Trump says he, hopefully, won't need military action against Iran. Trump warns Iran to make nuclear deal or next attack will be far worse. Trump warns Iran to make nuclear deal or next attack will be far worse. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday that he hopes to avoid military action against Iran, despite rising tensions and threats from Tehran to strike U.S. bases and aircraft carriers if attacked. Speaking to reporters, Trump said the United States is in contact with Iran and that talks are possible. "I have had, and I am planning on it," he said, adding that while a large U.S. naval force is moving toward the region, he hopes it will not be used. His comments came amid escalating rhetoric from Washington and European allies, and strong warnings from Tehran. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged renewed nuclear negotiations to prevent what he described as a potentially devastating regional crisis. Iranian officials warned that any U.S. military action would trigger an immediate and wide-ranging response. A military spokesman said American aircraft carriers and bases in the Gulf region are vulnerable and within missile range. He cautioned that any attack would not be brief or symbolic, warning that Iran's response would be swift and decisive. New Zealand has decided not to join U.S. President Donald Trump's newly announced Board of Peace, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said on Friday. The initiative was launched last week and was initially aimed at supporting the fragile ceasefire in Gaza, though Trump has said he wants it to take on a broader global role. While several Middle Eastern countries, including Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, as well as emerging nations like Indonesia have agreed to join, many traditional U.S. allies have taken a more cautious approach. Luxon said New Zealand chose not to participate in the Board of Peace in its current form. Foreign Minister Winston Peters said that countries closer to the Gaza conflict were already contributing and that New Zealand would not add meaningful value at this stage. He also stressed New Zealand's long-standing commitment to the United Nations, saying any new initiative should align with the UN Charter. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday he hopes military action against Iran will not be necessary, signaling a preference for diplomacy despite growing U.S. military pressure. Speaking to reporters, Trump said the United States has deployed significant military forces to the region but would rather not use them. He confirmed that contacts with Iranian officials have already taken place and said further talks are expected. Trump's comments come as tensions remain high between Washington and Tehran, with the U.S. urging Iran to return to negotiations over its nuclear program while reinforcing its military presence as leverage. U.S. President Donald Trump on January 28 urged Iran to return to negotiations over its nuclear program, warning that failure to do so could lead to a much harsher U.S. military response. In a social media post, Trump said Iran must agree to a deal that prevents it from acquiring nuclear weapons, adding that time is running out. He warned that any future U.S. attack would be far worse than previous strikes, and said an American naval armada was moving toward the region. Iran responded with strong warnings of its own. Ali Shamkhani, an advisor to Iran's supreme leader, said any U.S. military action would lead Tehran to strike back at the United States, Israel, and their allies. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Iran's armed forces are ready to respond immediately to any attack, while also insisting that Tehran remains open to a fair nuclear deal, provided it is free from threats and coercion and respects Iran's right to peaceful nuclear technology. Trump confirmed that a U.S. naval force led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln has entered the Middle East. U.S. officials say the deployment is meant to increase pressure on Tehran as tensions rise following Iran's recent crackdown on protests. The United States has eased sanctions on Venezuela's oil industry after lawmakers in Caracas approved major reforms allowing private investment, opening the door for U.S. companies to return. Less than an hour after the vote, the U.S. Treasury issued a license allowing American firms to trade with Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, including oil production and refining. Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez called the move a historic step while addressing oil workers. She confirmed speaking by phone with Donald Trump, who also announced the reopening of Venezuela's airspace. The policy shift follows the January 3 removal of former President Nicolás Maduro in a U.S.-led operation. Washington has since backed Rodriguez's leadership, on the condition that Venezuela open its vast oil reserves to U.S. investment. The new law reverses restrictions put in place under former President Hugo Chavez, who nationalized the oil industry nearly 2 decades ago. It removes the requirement that foreign companies operate only through joint ventures controlled by the state. Parliament Speaker Jorge Rodriguez said the reform would help Venezuela recover from years of economic isolation and declining oil production.